I wonder if as society moves away from sort of traditional masculinity in certain ways, that comedy just inevitably declines. And the reason that I say that is not because women can't be funny. There are some very funny women. But because the way that men tend to interact, like when you're with your friends at a ball game or something, half of your conversation is just making fun of each other. Yeah. Half your conversation is just ribbing the hell out of each other and ripping on people and telling jokes about each other. And when women go out to brunch with each other, that's not really what they're doing, at least not in my personal experience. That's not how my wife interacts with her friends. They don't sit around like ripping on each other. That's what dudes do. Like when you're at a poker game, you just rip on each other and make fun of how dumb you all are. And so and it's a sign of masculinity to be able to like brush that off, right? If you're a really offended guy with a bunch of other guys, everybody looks at you like, what the hell? Like what's wrong with you?
But you don't go cry in the bathroom.
Right, exactly. And so I wonder if as a society, we've decided that masculinity itself is something that's bad. Masculinity is toxic and dangerous, that we have to tell fewer jokes. Jokes are too aggressive. Jokes are nasty. Jokes are mean. And so we really need to kind of wipe that away a little bit.
I couldn't disagree more. I think, the way that I put it, and I think it's an important point that people need to keep in the front of their minds, is that the absurd has only become sacred because it hasn't been sufficiently mocked. There's so much that's mockable, including the idea, by the way, that masculinity is a bad thing. That's a mockable idea. There's a lot of good that comes from this idea, toxic masculinity, and we need to men need to become more like women. And what even is a woman, Ben? What is a woman? These ideas are so mockable. We have to attack them, ridicule them. Really, honestly, it's a moral good to do that. Because otherwise they're gonna flourish. They're gonna become pervasive. They're gonna actually get picked up and believed by, kids are so susceptible to these things. Young people are so susceptible to these ideas because they haven't figured out their worldview. Like they don't have a solid foundation under them, like theologically and philosophically, to be able to ward off bad ideas. And so they can soak up these things that don't make any sense and think that they're reasonable. But if we were making fun of them more, I don't think that they would be so susceptible to them. I think they would see them for what they are, which is insane and stupid and even funny sometimes, and then they won't take them so seriously. And we'd all be better off for that, I think, ultimately.
There's a point you talked about a little bit earlier that I want to get back to for a second, and that is that if you want to do good humor, you actually have to target something that's true about the other side or whoever you're making a joke about. Yeah. You can't target something that's just narratively false. And that occurs to me in the context of late night comedians who've just fallen completely off the map in terms of comedy. I mean, you cannot watch Stephen Colbert's show and get from there to the idea that this is comedy. It's just not. I mean, Jimmy Fallon used to be somewhat funny. He is no longer funny at all. I remember when Stephen Colbert was funny, when he was a correspondent on Jon Stewart. And it feels as though the comedy is just not present anymore. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel is more of an MSNBC host than he is a comedian. And that's because he spends all day making jokes about things that are just not true. I mean, it's kind of amazing. It's
the propaganda. It's going for the applause of affirmation rather than the laughter of amusement. And you see it all the time in the stand-up, like they'll be doing their opening monologue or whatever, and the audience is like clapping. They're not laughing, they're clapping. Because there's like this propaganda that's being preached from the stage, and the audience is like agreeing with it. And it's not actual comedy that's happening. It's a very strange and bizarre thing. And I think that, the only way that they're going to start getting laughs is if they tell jokes that are true, for one thing, that aren't rooted in a narrative, promoting a narrative, and attack the things that are actually worth attacking, mocking. They're training their audiences to go along with this idea too, that these things are untouchable and they shouldn't be joked about. And I guarantee you that some of them have now reached the point where if they do make some of these jokes that are unacceptable, their audiences are going to walk out on them, or they're going to throw something at them, or they're going to walk up on stage and slap them in the face. Like there's actually physical threats of violence now against comedians for making jokes. That's how sensitive people are now. You see how Chappelle got attacked on stage. We saw what happened with Chris Rock getting slapped by Will Smith. And some of these smaller comedians, I read a story in the New York Post recently about their smaller clubs. These comedians are having to pay security to come with them to make sure they don't get attacked on stage. And they can't afford that. They're not getting paid a lot at these smaller clubs, but they're having to pay for security to keep them safe while they tell jokes. It's just a wild place to be in. So you're either safe because you're not actually telling jokes, or you're in danger because you are.
Okay, so now I'm going to put you on the spot. So I'll ask you, number one, your favorite joke, and number two, the best joke you've ever written.
That's tough. I'll tell you, I think one of my favorites, I have a lot of favorites to be. I think some of the ones that got fact-checked and then came true after they were fact-checked and rated false are great. That Trump one is a great example. One of the first ones that went really viral for the Bee sticks out in my memory. It was fact-checked. It was this joke about how Joel Osteen was sailing his yacht through the flooded streets of Houston following Hurricane Harvey, handing out copies of Your Best Life Now. And it was perfect for the Bee because it has that religious element to it. You know, we're criticizing a theological teaching that we disagree with, this like health and wealth gospel, and you know, like that gospel doesn't preach everywhere. It doesn't preach in the aftermath of a hurricane, right? And that one went crazy viral because people believed it was true. Like people actually thought Joel Osteen was handing out copies of it. The Photoshop was not even that great, you know. He's handing out copies to the people who are like drowning in the flooded streets of Houston. Houston Chronicle rated it false. I don't know. There were some other fact checkers that picked it up too. And I think that was back in like 2017 or something like that. But stories like that are really interesting because it's like there's a truth to them. We're making a point that we really want to make. And the media doesn't even know how to handle it and starts rating it. Those are like a perfect storm for me. I love those. What was the other question?
Your favorite joke, period.
Oh, I don't know. That would be tough. I think the first headline I ever wrote that got fact-checked was about how Democrats had drafted legislation that would make it a crime to eat at Chick-fil-A. And that got fact-checked because people believed that was true. I don't think it's the funniest joke I've ever written, but it was the first one that ever got fact-checked. So I thought about framing that one. I don't know. I'd have to give that some thought. I'm not sure what my favorite one is.
So I want to ask you also about what's coming next politically. So because you have a good track record of predicting what comes next politically by figuring out the most bizarre thing and then talking about it, and that seems to have inevitably happened. One of the things that I was talking with my business partner, Jeremy, about this the other day, and we were talking about what comes next in American politics, and he was saying, I think what we need, God needs to intervene. And I said, that's such a Christian perspective, because if you're a Jew, you're like, God already has intervened and he hates us, right? Like that's the Jewish perspective is like, it's too late, man. Like read the prophets are not all fun and games. It's not like, and that's when the good stuff happens. It's like, nope, you sin, here it comes, get ready.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it feels like we are. So put on your predictive hat. The funniest thing that could happen probably is a 2024 rematch between Trump and Biden. That would also be the most tragic thing that could probably happen at this point. Is it possible
that Hillary might run again?
This is the other possible.
Yeah, is that just wild?
No, that's like a 35% shot. That's like a 35% shot. Like I really think that's possible because, like, put aside Trump for a second. Biden is 1 million years old. I mean, he's like falling over. They're wheeling him out there, and he looks like the knight at the end of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. And like after he drank the wrong,
right.
Like after, like it's over, and he's like faded into just a skeleton, and they're just like,
he chose poorly.
He chose poorly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He chose poorly, and so Hillary's over here making her gutsy series about how produced by and written by and starring and about Hillary Clinton, about how gutsy she is, and she's on every morning. Like it's hard for me to see that not as a presidential move, right? I mean, she's over here going like, "Hey guys, I beat Trump in the popular vote a few years back, and it'd be the ultimate revenge is if I would beat him again." Like I don't think that's a complete, improbability.
I don't think so either. It seems to be posturing and positioning for that, which is just
it's so funny.
It's funny because then you've got like Trump, who was suggesting that, the election was unfair, and Hillary, who was suggesting when Trump beat her that election was unfair. You've got them going head to head again.
And Hillary saying Trump should go to jail for the documents. And saying
Hillary and he'll say, yes. So all of that's developed now since then. It makes it so much more interesting to see how that would actually play out and what lines of attack would they be able to launch at each other that they're even allowed to say. Trump's not even on Twitter anymore, So he'll make his statements on Truth Social, and then people will put them on Twitter, and then you have the back and forth.